Hello, 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 and how are you? I'm good, I'm fine, I'm wonderful. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Happy Classroom. And how's the weather? How's the weather? How's the weather today? Is it sunny or is it rainy? How's the weather today? How's the weather on your side? Is it sunny day or is it rainy day? On my side, it's rainy day. Do you love rainy days or sunny days? Do you still remember we talked about sunny days? Where does sunlight come from? How does sunlight reach us? In the previous video. And today, since here on my side it's rainy day, so let's talk about rain. Where does the rain come from and why there is rain? Are you ready? Today, let's find out the answer through an experiment that I did. Ready? Let's go! So, to start off with my experiment, I've just used two materials, a Ziploc bag and a marker pen. And let's see, what did I do? So first, I drew out the water source and cloud on Earth on the Ziploc bag. So, what are the water sources on Earth? Where does water come from? So, we know that there's water in the sea, there's water in the river, on the mountain, there's snow, and it's also water, a form of water. And plants also provide water, right? So I have drawn all of that on the Ziploc bag. The river, the snow mountains, the plants, the trees, and so on. You can draw any water sources on Earth on the Ziploc bag. You can even draw the ocean, the sea. So after I've drawn the water sources and clouds on the Ziploc bag, let's see my second step. So the second step, I poured colored water into my Ziploc bag. I've used blue color, so it's easier for me to see. It's easier for you all to see, to notice the water. I poured the watercolor in the Ziploc bag, just like this. And I sealed the Ziploc bag. And where did I put it? Ta-da! I taped it somewhere under the sun. I tape it outside on my gate under the sun. And let's wait for a few hours and see what happens. After a few hours, I've observed that the water starts to evaporate. The water starts to evaporate and form water vapor. You see, the water starts to evaporate and form water vapor. Slowly, the water vapor condenses. The water vapor condenses and forms the clouds. Form the clouds. After a few hours, I found this. I found out that the water vapor that condenses and forms the cloud precipitates and drop back to the ground, drop back to the water sources. So we know that the water on Earth evaporates and forms water vapor. And this water vapor will condense and form the cloud. And once the cloud is too heavy, then what will happen? Then the water in the cloud will precipitate and drop back to the ground, and this is how rain is formed. So through the experiment, I found out how rain is formed. I found out that the water, the blue water, will start to evaporate when there's sun, when the sunlight, the blue water will start to evaporate and form water vapor, and water vapor will condense and form the cloud. Will form the cloud, and when the cloud is too heavy, the water drops. Precipitate back to the ground, back to the river, back to the ocean, and so on. So now, let's revise. So today we are talking about the rain. Where does rain come from? From the experiment, we know that the water sources, the water on earth, there's the ocean, the rivers, the plants, all provides water on earth. So the water on earth will evaporate and become water vapor. The water vapor will condense and form the clouds. Then when the clouds are too heavy, it will precipitate and drop back as rain. The water precipitate, drop back as rain to the ground. And this is where rain comes from. And it's also the water cycle. Water cycle on earth. Water cycle. So the water cycle goes like this. The water on earth evaporates. And this process, we call it evaporation. Evaporates and form water vapor. So water vapor in the sky, in the air, will condense. We call it condensation. We call this process condensation and form the clouds. The water vapor condenses. Condensation, go through condensation and form the clouds. So when the clouds are too heavy, it precipitates. The water precipitates. We call this precipitation. And the water drop back to the ground as the rain. So the water drop back to the ground. So the water will go back to the oceans, go back to the rivers, go back to the ground, go back to the plants, and accumulate that. Accumulation. And all of this process repeats again. So the water on earth repeats again. It evaporates, evaporation, and form water vapor. Water vapor condenses, condensation, form the clouds. The clouds are too heavy, it precipitates. The rain comes down to the ground. So precipitation, water precipitates to the ground as the form of rain. And at last, it accumulates again in the river, in the ocean, the plants, the ground, accumulation. And the process, the water cycle, repeats again. So this is where rain comes from. So now, are you clear? Where did rain come from? Rain comes from the water on earth. It goes through evaporation. It forms the water vapor. The water vapor goes through condensation. It forms the clouds. The clouds are too heavy. It drops. It precipitates. It goes through precipitation and back to the ground, and it accumulates again in the sea, in the river. It's called accumulation. And this cycle repeats again. And this is where rain comes from. So after we know that, let's see how much I've learned. So for how much I've learned, let's make our own water cycle model and observe. Let's do your own experiment and observe how water evaporates, become water vapor, how water vapor condenses, and how water drops, precipitates, and accumulates. And for the second activity, we can make our own rain model and observe how the rain drops, how the rain precipitates to the ground. And then, last but not least, let's assemble and complete our own puzzle. So we have condensation here, precipitation, evaporation, accumulation, and the water cycle. Let's complete our own puzzle of the water cycle. And last but not least, put on your thinking cap. Let's think about what do we wear on rainy days and what can we do on rainy days. And that's all for our How Much I've Learned and Put on Your Thinking Cap activities. To get the handbook of the activities and of this lesson, please subscribe to our channel, like and share it out, and message us via Facebook, and you will receive your free handbook. And I hope you enjoyed today's sharing, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you. It's time to go. It's time to go. It's time to go.